Okay, so when you hear American Pit Bull Terrier, what's the first thing that pops into your head?
Yeah, it's usually strong images, right? Maybe stories you've heard.
Exactly. It's a breed that seems to carry, well, a lot of baggage. Fierce competitor on one hand, loving family dog on the other.
Hmm.
But how much of that perception is really, grounded in its actual history?
That's what we're digging into today. We're going to try and strip away some of those modern layers, look at the real origins, the surprising complexity of the American Pit Bull Terrier.
And we've got a great source for this.
We do. It's A Brief History of a Great Breed by Cherie Kavanaugh. It was published way back in '74 in the Bloodline Journal.
Right. So our goal here is to trace the lineage. We're talking ancient times, right through some major societal shifts.
Yeah, and see how this mix of sport, sheer necessity, and some really specific breeding created the dog we know, or think we know, today.
And what's really fascinating, I think, is how that perception and the reality can be so different. We'll definitely unpack that as we go.
Okay, so where do we start? We actually need to go back to ancient Britain. Roman legions arriving.
Ah, the Romans, roads, language.
And bull baiting. They brought that sport with them. It barely dates back even further to Minos in Crete, and it was tied into the worship of Mithras, the warrior god.
Mithras. So there was a whole cult connection.
Yeah, his followers saw his power symbolized in a young white bullock. They believed participating or even watching gave them courage, battle courage.
Wow. Okay. And the dogs involved back then.
Initially, huge, often wild, incredibly ferocious animals, not really distinct breeds as we'd think of them.
So more like raw material, I guess.
Pretty much. But as the Romans left or integrated, the sport stuck around. And over centuries, through really harsh selective breeding, only the toughest and smartest dogs survived those contests. They started to become more consistent, more typified, as the source says.
Okay, so fast forward quite a bit, early 1700s England.
Right. You've got this rising middle-class merchants, blacksmiths, innkeepers. They want to copy the upper classes, their lifestyles, their entertainments.
And bull baiting was
Yeah.
one of those entertainments.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, you look at the dogs around then. You had different types. Terriers, cattle dogs, shepherds.
And the bulldog.
Yes, the bulldog, which back then basically just meant a large dog, a mastiff type.
The source mentions some specific powerful ones.
It does. The terrible blue paw from Scotland, the just as terrible Alain from Ireland. These were brought in, crossbred with English dogs specifically for bull baiting.
So purpose-bred even then.
Very much so. By 1800, you get these large, long-legged dogs, maybe 80, 90 pounds. And here's a key point, often intentionally underfed.
To make them fiercer.
Exactly, to enhance that ferocity for the ring.
Grim stuff. But things changed again.
They did. Early 1800s, economic hardship hits England. Bull baiting just became too expensive for most people.
So the sport itself started to fade.
Yeah, it was officially banned in 1835, though some diehards kept doing it on the quiet for a few more years.
Okay, so bull baiting's out, or mostly out. What fills the gap?
Well, for the, let's say, law-abiding folks, a new sport emerged. Cheaper, easier to stage, dogfighting.
Ah. And those big bull baiting dogs.
They weren't really suited for it. Too big, too cumbersome, not fast enough, not agile enough for this new kind of fight.
Which begs the question, what kind of dog was needed? Where did that speed and agility come from?
To answer that, we need to look at a different part of English society, the lower class, often overlooked in these histories.
Okay. What was their connection?
They had serious problems with vermin, rats mostly, and their practical solution, terriers.
Right, while the wealthier classes were breeding big dogs for sport.
The lower classes were honing the terrier for survival. These dogs weren't pets in the modern sense. They were essential tools.
And these terriers had specific traits.
Absolutely. Small, quick, agile, really sinewy, deep chests for stamina. Powerful enough to literally dig rats out of their burrows.
So a working dog through and through.
Definitely. Protecting precious food stores, chickens from foxes, grain from rats. A good terrier was vital for a poor family.
And they had their own sports, too.
They did. Ratting. Hugely popular. They'd catch rats, put them in a pit. People would place bets.
And release the terriers.
Yep. And the dog that killed the most rats in the shortest time won. The owner took home the winnings. Simple, brutal, but popular.
And were there specific types of terriers involved that are important here?
Yes, the source mentions a few key ones. The English White Terrier. It's extinct now, sadly, gone by the early 1900s.
Mm-hmm.
But it looked a bit like a modern Manchester Terrier in build.
Mm-hmm.
but its head shape was apparently quite similar to the modern APBT.
Interesting, right?
Very. What else? The Black and Tan Terrier, which basically is the ancestor of today's Manchester Terrier, not much changed. And the Fox Terrier, a bit bigger, more robust, good for larger pests.
Okay, so we have the big, powerful bulldogs from baiting, now somewhat obsolete for fighting, and these quick, agile, determined terriers bred by the working class.
Exactly. And now comes the key moment. The breakthrough.
The cross.
The cross. Someone, somewhere history doesn't record, who had the idea to breed the huge bulldog with the agile terrier.
And it worked.
It worked brilliantly. The source suggests this happened primarily among the coal miners and iron workers in Staffordshire, central England.
Ah, Staffordshire. That name sounds familiar.
It should. The resulting dog was called simply the Bull Terrier.
And it took off.
It really did, especially among the sporting men. Why? Well, it was more compact, easier to handle, cheaper to feed.
Practical advantages.
Definitely. But crucially, it had this terrier-like propensity toward mankind.
Yeah.
That's the source's phrase, meaning it had this innate drive to work with humans, this eagerness to please its owner. This was huge. It meant owners could be right there in the contest, encouraging their dogs, handling them. Very different from just watching a bull baiting.
More interactive, more personal involvement.
Exactly. Now, where did these fights happen? At first, anywhere. Old bull rings, street corners, barns.
Makeshift arenas.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But as the middle class got back on its feet economically, they really embraced this new sport. Soon, pubs and inns often had a small arena, sometimes just in the main room.
And these became known as?
Pits. That name came directly from the old ratting sport.
Ah, the rat pits, okay.
So the fighting became pitting, and the winning dogs were called pit dogs. It even got fashionable for a while, these young dandies carrying a bull and terrier under their arm, showing it off in the pub bar, taking bets.
Quite the scene. Now, what happened to the original bulldog, the big one?
It actually became quite rare. Its main use was now as, foundation stock for this newer, faster bull and terrier.
So it's being bred out, in a way.
In that fighting line, yes.
Yeah.
But a few dedicated people, mostly wealthy landholders, wanted to save the old type.
How did they do that?
They introduced a new dog breed that was just arriving from China, the pug.
The pug. Seriously. With the bulldog.
Yep. By carefully crossing the old-style bulldogs with pugs, they gradually developed the dog we recognize today as the modern bulldog, short legs, pushed-in face, kinked tail, broad, squat body.
Wow. So two completely different paths from dogs that shared a name. That's fascinating.
Isn't it? Meanwhile, back in Staffordshire, those bull and terriers were gaining a serious reputation for gameness, that unwavering spirit, the refusal to quit, even when injured. Because of that strong mining community, maybe, they developed a really consistent look and temperament typiness.
And became known as?
The Staffordshire Bull Terrier, though it took until 1935 for the English Kennel Club to make it official.
Okay, so we have the Staffordshire Bull Terrier established in England. How does it get to America?
Well, people immigrate, they bring their dogs. Colonization of America, Canada, settlers needed dogs.
Terriers for the same reasons as in England? Pests, survival?
Exactly. And the big, fierce bulldog types were still valued, too, for protection, guarding property, and yes, for sport, which also crossed the Atlantic.
So bull and terrier types started developing in America, too.
They did. And interestingly, the American version tended to be a bit larger, heavier boned than its English cousin.
Then more English dogs arrived.
Right. Just before the Civil War, merchants, sailors, traders brought English dogs over, and the sport really took root in port towns.
And the English and American types were mixed.
Crossbred, refined by those sporting men, the breeders, they were actively shaping the American variant.
Which leads us to formal recognition here.
Yes, a really key moment was 1898. A man named C.B. Bennett, well-known sportsman, breeder, he organized things.
How so?
He set up a stud book, a registry office specifically for these dogs. He's the one who officially gave it the name American Pit Bull Terrier.
Okay, so he coined the name.
Coined the name, established the breed standard, even set the rules for pitting, and he founded the United Kennel Club, the UKC.
The UKC, I've heard of them.
Right. Initially, its sole purpose was registering the American Pit Bull Terrier. It eventually grew to be the second largest dog registry in the U.S.
Wow, quite a foundation. Okay, so we've traced the often brutal history, the breeding. Let's talk about the dog itself, its nature.
Yeah, let's unpack that. Because here's the contradiction, the thing that confuses so many people.
Which is?
It's considered maybe the most powerful dog, pound for pound, ever created. Immense strength, drive, tenacity bred into it for centuries.
Okay.
But at the same time, these dogs are known for incredible devotion to humans, a really steady temperament with people they know.
So, ultimate fighter, but also loving companion. How does that work?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And maybe the most important takeaway. This breed shows how specific, even violent human needs can unintentionally create this paradox. Incredible physical prowess combined with a deep human bond.
So that versatility is key. It's not just about the pit.
Absolutely not. Maybe versatility is its most outstanding trait. They have a natural hunting drive. People have trained them for everything, from birds to wild boar.
That fearlessness and stamina must help there.
Definitely. High pain threshold, too. They can take, as the source says, brutal punishment without a whimper. But interestingly,
Yeah.
those same traits make it not a good hunter for things like bears or big cats.
Yeah.
Its instinct is to latch on, hold its ground.
Which, against a bigger predator.
Often leads to its own destruction, sadly. It doesn't have that self-preservation instinct to break off easily.
Gotcha. What about the common perception, the fear around aggression towards people?
Well, the history suggests it's not inherently an indiscriminate people biter. Remember that propensity toward mankind trait bred into the bull and terrier?
Right, the need to work with the handler, even in the pit.
Exactly. Aggression towards humans was actively bred against because handlers needed to be safe, separating dogs. They seem to have a knack for telling real threats from play.
So good family dogs, what about kids?
The source says unusually tolerant of small children. They seem to accept roughhousing, even gauge their own strengths when playing with a child. Protective if needed, but generally very gentle with their family.
That really flies in the face of the stereotype.
It often does. And they're adaptable, too. City apartment, suburban house, farm, kennel.
They tend to fit in.
Easy keepers, relatively. Very short coat, minimal shedding. Basic grooming, teeth, ears, nails. Pretty low maintenance in that sense.
And intelligence. All those centuries of needing wits to survive.
It shows. They're considered highly intelligent. Combine that with the willingness to please, and they're generally easy to train.
But they remember things.
Oh, yeah. Rarely forget. Long attention span, too. But they also have a mind of their own. The force even jokes they can outsmart their human owners.
I can imagine. Okay, so beyond the pit and the home, this breed actually had a moment in the cultural spotlight too, right?
Big time. Early 1900s America, the APBT was hugely popular. You see it everywhere in pop culture then.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Okay, think Buster Brown, the comic strip. His dog, Tiege. That was an APB kid.
No way.
The dog on the RCA logo, his master's voice. Nipper? Often claimed to be Thomas Edison's own APDT.
Really?
During World War I, Allied recruitment posters used dogs to symbolize the nations. The American Pit Bull Terrier represented Old Glory, the U.S.,
Alongside.
the English Bulldog for the UK's Union Jack, and the French Bulldog for the tricolor flag of France.
That's amazing cultural acceptance. And wasn't there a famous movie dog?
Pete the Pup, from the Our Gang or Little Rascals comedies, that ring around his eye.
Of course, Pete.
He was actually the first dog registered with the American Kennel Club, the AKC, as a Staffordshire Terrier, which is the AKC's name for the APBT for a time.
So a certified star, it seems like the breed's profile has gone up and down over the years.
It definitely has. But right now, it feels like we're seeing another resurgence in popularity for this truly great breed.
So wrapping this up, it feels like we've really uncovered a history that's way more complex, more nuanced than the headlines suggest.
Absolutely. From Roman arenas to working-class rat pits to the fighting pits and then into homes and pop culture. It's an incredible journey.
And it shows how physical traits, mental traits, even temperament were actively shaped by human needs, human sports, human society over centuries.
Yeah, and that deep connection, that intertwining of the dog's history with our history, our changing needs, and frankly, our changing perceptions. It raises some big questions, doesn't it?
Like what? What should we be thinking about?
Well, what does this tell us about our responsibility?
Yeah.
How we shape the narratives around animals? How we manage the reality of the breeds we create and live with?
That's a heavy thought. If the APBT's story is this rich, this misunderstood, how many other breeds have complex histories we just don't know or ignore?
Exactly. And if we did know those histories, how might that change how we see them, how we relate to them? What part of this whole journey really stands out to you? Something to chew on, I suppose.